Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielson and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Hope you had an awesome weekend, and I guess Happy New Year as well. I guess we can say that for the next few days. Middle of the holidays, the Lock Shop don't stop. Welcome to the program. Huss, JBM with you today as Dusty's away for the week, but we will be holding it down, getting ready for Week 18 in the National Football League. We've got World Juniors happening. It is it's safe to say, Jake, it's a very busy time over at the shop these days with Coolbet, between hockey and football, college bowl games these next couple days. Pretty fun time for sports bettors as we finish up 2024.
Yeah, the party don't stop for the holidays, Huss, and neither do the sports, right? It just keeps rolling on. So, we try to do our best to get a bit of rest and relaxation, but we're also staying pretty dialed into what's going on. I do want to say, we didn't get a chat about this in our text group, but I just talked with Patty. So tonight we've got the Canada-Costa Rica final. Top two out of the final will get a chance to go to Costa Rica for the Costa Rica Poker Festival. I believe it's like a week event. You get, stay, a bit of an allowance. And what we're going to do, I think on a Lock Shop, I just spoke with Patty about this. We're going to do a keyword in the chat. Okay, so if you post the keyword, let's just do Costa, C-O-S-T-A, in the chat during any part of the Lock Shop today, I'll add you to our random wheel. And then before the show ends, I'll spin the wheel 2 times. I think we'll give away 2 different tickets to get into that poker final tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain. And you'll get a chance to play in that. It'll be a lot shorter than our usual Lock Shop tournaments. There's not going to be as many players in this. But the top 2 are going to go away with a chance to go to Costa Rica. I believe that's at the end of January or early February. I have to double check on that. But so if you post the keyword Costa in the chat today, I believe, Huss, you'll be playing in the tournament as well tonight.
I have declared that I will be in the tournament tonight. This is not like the Lock Shop Poker Open where you can just be taking shots at me all night for the $100 bounty. There's a far greater prize, and I am not it. So let's have some fun tonight, folks. But yes, if you I see there's Jason and Leduc, Smitty the Welder. Throw that in.
Yep.
And we'll spin it at the end of the show and get somebody in for the tournament, which should be fun. I've had so much fun playing poker on Coolbet. I mean, we kind of started this, and I like many kind of had a heyday playing a lot of internet poker years ago, and then haven't as much over the last few years. And the Lock Shop Poker Series has revived my love for online poker, and the Coolbet app to work with it has been just awesome. So we will look forward to another Lock Shop Poker Series coming up in 2025 in January at some point. But in the meantime, put in Costa in the chat, and we'll spin the random wheel, and somebody will get an entry into a tourney where if you finish top 2, and we're heading down to play with some real ballers down in Costa Rica for the tourney. I see everyone. It says, what is the buy-in? I've doubled up the bounty I took from Huss. Yes.
So it's no buy-in. This will be a ticket into the event. There'll be no buy-in for this tonight's tournament. So this is really what you're putting in the chat for. Like, you put Costa in the chat, I'm already adding you to the wheel. I've got Jason and Leduc, Smitty the Welder, Cowboy, and Dudley so far on my random wheel. We'll spin. I'm going to double check with Patty. I think we'll probably spin for 2 winners, though, today. So you'll have 2 chances to get in at the end of the show.
Sounds good. I mean, we could do one on WST, too, if you wanted. So you guys figure that out. But if you want, we can definitely get in with VR Montenegro. Costco. No, it's Costa VR. It's Costa. Listen, we know you like to bring the boom, but it's Costa, not Costco right now. Man, where do we want to start from yesterday in the National Football League? Actually, I know where I want to start.
You go ahead.
Raheem Morris How many times have we had this conversation, Jake, where if these NFL head coaches could just have a kid, a 15-year-old kid that plays 100 games of Madden under his belt, that would be able to tell an NFL coach, you need to take a timeout right now. That was like, we've seen some really bad time clock management this year. I think about that Bears game earlier on this season. That was an absolutely laughable situation. But oh my God, the way they came back into that game, Penix with that incredible drive to tie it up. The defense holds, they get the ball back, they move it down the field with 2 timeouts left. They let half the clock expire before the snap is even taken and don't have the opportunity to even use that final timeout. Like that wasn't just terrible clock management. That could end their season because they didn't get the flip in overtime. They never touched the ball. Jaden Daniels and the Commanders ran down and put up a touchdown, which was awesome for those of us that had Commanders -3.5. Like, I'm not complaining about the result, but my God, if you're a Falcons fan right now, you have to be absolutely beside yourself that your season probably was cost by one of the most elementary and simple time management decisions that was botched as bad as any I can remember in a long time.
Yeah, it's like, how have we not learned our lesson at this point, though? Like, not only are we 17 weeks into the season, but how many times have we seen this year after year after year where these coaches just make the worst time management decisions that, it's like they're one-upping each other. Like, anything you can do, I can do worse. It's pretty crazy, but here we are, and the Falcons are now staring down the brink of elimination. I think if the Bucs win next week, it's over for them. After they had a stranglehold on that division for really most of the middle of the season. And I'm not mad. I got that Bucs to make the playoffs. I thought they had blown it last week with that loss to Dallas. Yep. They come back, they crush the Panthers, they get some help from the Commanders, and now their destiny's in their hands. And Baker's been playing unreal football. Like, they're a feisty team, Us. I don't know what you think about the Bucs, and I know they've been beating up on some bad teams down the stretch here, but anyone with momentum is a scary. Like, anyone with momentum is a scary thought. And the Bucs can roll next week. I don't think they're going to be an easy out. Is my point.
Baker is an absolute baller. In all likelihood, the way this, I'm just going to pull this up. Let's get NFL standings up here. And we'll get to the Monday Nighter tonight because it's a very weird and unique situation. But as far as the playoff goes right now in the NFC, Philly is locked in as the 2 seed right now. Detroit, of course, is technically in the 5 seed. They're playing tonight. The expectation is, as a favorite, that Detroit would win this game. And you would have Minnesota and Detroit playing next week on Sunday Night Football. Winner gets the 1 seed and the division, the bye, home field, losers the 5 seed. That 5 seed, I was going to say that 5 seed will play the Buccaneers. I guess there is a scenario where the Rams can lose next week now that they've clinched, and the Buccaneers could win, and both teams would be 10-7. Now, did those teams play each other this year? Tampa did not play the Rams this year. So I'm actually not sure whether that would mean potentially they would move up. But the bottom line is it's going to be either Minnesota or Detroit in the 5 seed, and they'll be playing the lower ranked of, assuming it's Tampa, or the Rams in that spot. The Eagles, in all likelihood, will be the number 2 seed. And then we've got this game. And I can't remember a scenario like this, Jake, where we know that next week is going to be an all or nothing game for the division title between Minnesota and Detroit. And yet Detroit still has this game tonight. And I don't believe it really means anything.
Tonight doesn't mean anything for Detroit?
For Detroit. because next week, if they lose, they'd be 13-3 playing 14-2. If they beat Minnesota, they'll both be 14-3, and they'll have the sweep over the Vikings in the division.
Minnesota twice, yeah.
The only thing that I'm not entirely sure of is where in that scenario, if Detroit loses tonight and wins next week, Detroit would be number one. I believe, but there's also Philly then you have to worry about. Like Philly at 13-3 could win next week and get to 14-3 as well. Their conference record, if the Vikings lost.
I had heard today that Philly was locked into the 2 no matter what. But
okay.
Maybe, I don't know if I have that right. But
because it's going to end up going down to strength of schedule. I think that's what it would be. And then I think in that case, the Lions would get the 1 seed. And then it wouldn't matter either way because Minnesota couldn't be the 2. They'd have to be it. So this is why, I mean, I guess we can touch on this game right. Well, you know what? We'll finish up with this game. But right now the line is Lions -3.5, which is sort of a weird, there's a lot of people that are needing Jahmyr Gibbs, for instance, to have a big game for fantasy tonight for their fantasy championship. They might not want to risk him if Montgomery's already hurt and knowing they're going to need him next week. So this is going to be a very cautious plays tonight when it comes in. Maybe we just focus in on San Francisco, knowing that this is it for them, and we go from there. As far as the AFC goes, Chiefs are locked in with the bye. They will be finishing up next week against the Broncos. Carson Wentz will be starting for Kansas City. They'll have another week off, and then they'll play at home in the divisional finals. The Bills are locked in at 2. They have nothing to play for next week. I'd be stunned if they throw Josh Allen or some of the starters out there. The Ravens are playing on Saturday, as are the Steelers. The Ravens are a massive favorite against the Cleveland Browns. I believe the biggest line of the year. And then Pittsburgh's playing Cincy. Baltimore wins, they clinch their division, and they lock themselves into the 3-hole. Pittsburgh is clinched for a playoff spot. But if they lose to the Bengals on Saturday, the Bengals are still alive for a playoff spot. Now, they would need 2 things to happen. First, they'd need the Chiefs to beat the Broncos, knowing that their starters aren't playing. Mm-hmm. That's a concern. They also have to worry about the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are at 8-8. If they both finished at 9-8, the Dolphins get the tiebreaker over Cincinnati based on the best win percentage in conference games. So this is a real long shot for Cincinnati to win in Pittsburgh, first of all, then have Miami lose. They're playing against the Jets, and then have Carson Wentz beat the Broncos. So Bengals fans still holding out hope right now. But to me, I have a hard time imagining it's not the Broncos coming into that 7 seed. The one interesting thing is a Charger win and a Pittsburgh loss would put Chargers in at the 5 seed. And let's face it, being 5th, being the top wild card spot is important because Houston, as I think we can all agree, Jake, not even in the area code of the other 3 teams that are the true Super Bowl contenders in the AFC in Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore.
Yeah, no, I think 5 seed is definitely where you want to be right now. And that makes the scenario that much more interesting because, the Steelers are playing the Bengals. And technically, because it's on Saturday, both those teams are playing to win. There's no scenario where the Bengals are going to come in and say, well, our chances are over. Like, they have the first game. They have to set the tone for their chances to remain alive. So right now, I'm looking at the NFL playoff probability as we're speaking. The Bengals only got a 17% chance to make the playoffs. But the only way they can make that a little bit better is if they win against Pittsburgh on Saturday. But like you said, that 5th seed is so important. And with the Steelers' loss and the Chargers win, the Chargers get a much easier path, at least in that wild card weekend. I know we're discrediting the Texans a bit, but out of the other two options that you have in the Bills or the Ravens, I think you're taking the Texans every day of the week, right? So it's still an interesting scenario in the AFC. Like there's not much left to happen in the NFC in terms of seeding, yes, but in terms of who's making the playoffs, it's the Bucks. The Bucks creating their own destiny, and the Falcons praying that the Bucks lose. You look at the Bengals; it's a tough spot for them. The Broncos are 9.5-point favorites against the Chiefs because it's not going to be the starters playing. The Dolphins are slight favorites over the Jets as well. So the Bengals, they really, if you look at it, they need a miracle here. And and a crazy, we haven't even got to the one game from the weekend that has a lot of implications for a lot of teams. The Colts had a chance to still be in this race. And the New York Giants have now moved from the first overall pick to the 4th overall pick after beating them in their first home win of the season on Sunday.
Drew Lock putting up 45 on the Colts and ruining the number 1 overall pick for the Giants is so hilarious. Maybe he's the quarterback of the future. He's played himself into that spot. They don't have the pick anymore. They go a different direction. Hey, Malik Neighbors, I bet he's fine with getting a little bit more time with Drew Lock. They threw to him on every play at 171 yesterday. That Colts loss is as bad a loss as you'll see in a long time. I don't know if you saw Pat McAfee. Pat had a lengthy post. You could tell he was putting this one together for a while. Just talking about how disgusted he is with what has become of the Colts. I know today on his show, that was a big topic. Him and Darius Butler going on and on about that. But yeah, and your Patriots right now, of all teams. I was actually, before we went in, I was just looking at my futures from the start of the season, and I had sort of written off the Patriots for the most losses. But guess what? They're right there. Now, of most losses, I would imagine that that's probably a split. If there's 3 teams that all finish with 3 wins, it probably gets sort of chopped. But I guess we'll see. I mean, the other definition of most losses would be the last place team in the first round pick. But This is a preseason one. This wasn't one that was, they kind of, before we were talking about it, who will finish last, that was specifically for the first round pick. I don't know how that one will be graded, but the Pats are at least in it. Now, just from a New England standpoint, Jake, let's say you guys get the job done and lose next week. Well, the funny thing is, you're playing the Bills. It'll be all the backups. Like, did they sit Drake May? I mean, that's not really something that you would normally do for a team that's out of it. But like, if you guys get the number 1 pick, having just taken Drake May, what an amazing scenario to potentially trade down with a QB needy team that will pay a premium to come up and get that first round pick. And then add some more picks to, further fortify and solidify the team around Drake May, of which there are many needs on the offensive line and elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those scenarios right now. You look at Tankathon, and obviously they just do the mock based on the order. Well, the order has us taking Travis Hunter at 1, but last week when we were the 3rd, 4th pick, they still had him taking Travis Hunter because those teams in the top half, i.e. the Giants, the Raiders, they're teams looking for quarterbacks. So we're in a scenario now where Patriots lose next week to the Bills, and I know, like you said, it's going to be a totally different scenario because the Bills are going to be resting starters, and they're kind of locked into their spot. But it's one of those situations where it's like you just get the job done, you get that first overall pick, and now you have all the control. The draft runs through the Patriots with the first overall pick. You're pretty happy with your quarterback play after this season. I know it wasn't a lot of wins there, but there was a lot of positives that you can pull from Drake May's first season in the league. And it's a matter of protecting him right now, and it's a matter of, getting him some weapons. So, I still think I'd like Travis Hunter. I think he's a versatile guy. I don't know how they would play him. So that'll be an interesting thing. Is he going to get snaps on both sides of the ball? Is that going to be part of what he wants? I know it's not necessarily his choice, but it's one of those things we really haven't seen in a long time here, where a guy can play both sides of the ball. We see a lot of guys who can, play on the defensive side and kick return, and it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
This is a guy who can play top level cornerback and play top level receiver, and it's like, where do you put him? Where is he going to be best suitable for the team? But like you said, maybe you have another pick in the top, in the first half of that draft, where you can pick up, maybe a good O lineman, start to build out this O line and start to protect this guy. So it'll be interesting. Like, they brought in Jalen Polk this past season in the draft. He hasn't had a great season, but you wonder what it looks like when you really start to build out that receiver room, build out the offensive line. Like,
your team can't draft receivers. They are the worst team in the league. Like, they traded out of the pick that became Ladd McConkey for the Chargers, and then took Jalen Polk. And I think we all know how that's gone this year. McConkey's an absolute stud. He's already Justin Herbert's number one guy, and Polk hasn't been. I would be very, at least Travis Hunter is just such a can't miss athlete that he will help you on one side of the ball for sure.
Right.
Like, if nothing else, you can put him in a corner, he'll be great. And then, you go to a 4 wide receiver set. You need a big guy out there. You can add him into it. The way that team has graded and drafted receivers.
You have a two-headed monster. You have two-headed monster at corner with Christian Gonzalez there as well. And then, you could argue that you're starting to build out that defense to be a little better as well. I don't know what they're going to do with Mayo. I'm hearing a lot of Pats talk about, like, he's got to go, which would be fine with me, but it's like, he's only been here 1 year, and it's not like we expected it to be a big year. It's the ultimate test, Huss, where it's like, if Gerard Mayo loses, is that more beneficial to his coaching with the Patriots next year, or less beneficial, right?
Great question.
Like, if you lose, you get the first overall pick, but if you win, now you put the team in a worse spot. And it's like, is that, like, what is more beneficial to stick around as the Pats head coach next year, a win or a loss on Sunday?
Well, it depends on what Robert Kraft thinks, because that is what it sounds like. He's been pretty loyal. I don't know how they don't jump at the opportunity to get Mike Vrabel in as their new head coach. I mean, that guy, former Patriot, a champion, would come in, establish a winning culture right away. You got a good OC in there. You've got the quarterback. I mean, I think you could really be on the road back to being, a significant contender right now.
Yeah,
some stuff in the chat. By the way, if you're coming in, if you want to potentially win an entry into a qualifier tournament where the top 2 tonight go to a big poker event in Costa Rica, that is why people are putting Costa in the chat. We'll spin the wheel at the end and get somebody a ticket for this thing.
In reference to that, I did talk to Patty. He said we'll do 1 entry here on the Lock Shop, and then we'll have you guys on WST do one as well, however you feel suited. And
Sounds
then that'll give us our 2 entries. You'll get a ticket, like Huss said, into the qualifier, and the top 2 from the qualifier, which goes tonight, will go on to the Costa Rica Festival. You get a week down in Costa Rica. You get, a bit of an allowance, stay. It's an incredible time. It'd be an awesome trip. Even if you're not a huge poker player, you're still down in Costa Rica and you're having a good time, and you get to experience something completely different. So, if you want a chance to get into the qualifier, put Costa in the chat, and there'll also be, you got to listen to WST this afternoon if you want another chance for an entry into tonight's qualifier. Yeah,
we'll do that later on in the show when we get to the Coolbet lines. By the way, Spency 5 Centsy, I've got a ticket for the Pats under 4.5 wins. Thanks for that one, boys. At the start of the year, I thought that those unders on the Pats were looking a little dangerous, but we're back to where we thought. And Cowboy, yes, riding with me on the Cincy, back-to-back years, fading the Bengals at more than 2-1 to miss the playoffs. Little bit left to do. And Zulu's funny. Yeah, nothing game for the Lions, but they will try and win by 60. Don't put that past Dan Campbell at all. And listen, Aiden O'Neill, I think Allen will at least play a snap or 2. He said how proud he is of his game playing streak and has made it known how important that is to him. They were talking about it on the broadcast. I agree. I mean, and listen, maybe they do it just to keep the streak going. There's something to be said. I mean, Mahomes hasn't missed a start per se, but he's been rested because they've clinched the AFC earlier, and that's going to happen as well. So bottom line is, you want Josh. What's important for Josh Allen is playing and winning 3 games in the playoffs and making it to the Super Bowl. So if they feel this gives them a better chance to win, I think they'll do that. And I have no doubt that Josh Allen will do what is in the best interest of the team. Jake, as far as the rest of the games on the weekend, the bottom of the draft is now quite interesting. Did you see the Seahawks Bears game on Thursday night?
I didn't. I saw the final score. I'll be honest. I did not watch.
You're lucky. It was the
ugly.
worst game. Like, honestly, it is right up there for the worst game played in the last decade in the NFL. It was so bad. Like, not only was the level of play like D3, but the coaching decisions were poor. The amount of penalties on both of these teams was absolutely embarrassing. It was so funny after seeing the Chiefs and Ravens do their thing on Christmas Day to follow that up on Boxing Day with the Seahawks beating the Bears 6-3. And I'll tell you what, it's probably a good thing. Like, it would be great if that Seahawks-Rams game meant something. But after watching the Seahawks play to the Bears level in a game of that much importance, they don't belong in the playoffs either. So that was an absolute abject disaster. What were the other ones? I mean, listen, you brought the Bucks up. I mean, as bad as the Falcons, choked over themselves after coming back in that game, Tampa is an offensive powerhouse right now, and Baker Mayfield is a guy that'll play you very, very tough, no matter what or where you are. I love the fact that the Bucks probably will be a playoff team. And again, all they have to do is beat the Saints this week coming up. The Saints, who just lost to the Raiders at home, who just got humiliated by the Packers on Monday Night Football. But I think the game that everyone was fired up about that we haven't touched on yet was that Packers-Vikings game. And I got to tell you, I mean, you know me, I've been high on the Vikings throughout the year. This is even beyond my wildest expectations. And I mean, I know a lot of Viking fans around here in the Peg. I mean, they just cannot believe how well this season has gone. And I got to tell you, I'm hoping that we start hearing, I know I have a ticket for it, so this is somewhat self-indulgent, but Sam Darnold should absolutely be in the mix, if not the favorite, for the comeback player of the year. And Kevin O'Connell, they should just be engraving his name on the coach of the year so far already. But, man, the biggest conversation around the Vikings right now, not short-term and what happens in the playoffs, is what happens with that quarterback position. And, I mean, at this point, I would be stunned if Sam Darnold isn't the starter for the Vikings next year. Now, whether that's on a 1-year franchise tag, whether that's a 2-year deal, whether that's something that would allow them to keep him and then potentially trade him afterwards, or, as I heard Simmons talk about earlier this morning, I mean, at what point do you start thinking about what that McCarthy asset would get back to you and just know that, hey, Sam Darnold's just won 14 games, potentially 15 games. They could be the
Might
one
win the
seed.
division, Huss.
Yeah.
Like a 1 seed. Like, they're really good. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that, where we were at the start of the season, what were they, like 11-1?
11-1.
11-1 to win the division. And, I mean, they're in the playoffs, no problem. Like, I don't know. It's one of those scenarios where it's like, there's no guarantee that J.J. McCarthy is going to be this number one franchise QB. I'm sure the Vikings very much hope he is, but you know what you're getting out of Sam Darnold at this point. He's building chemistry with not just Justin Jefferson, but, I think Naylor had a really good game yesterday. I think, who was the other guy? I don't know why I'm losing his name in my head here. There's that number two receiver. Yeah,
Jordan Addison.
Jordan Addison. He's had a great, great year with Darnold as well. Like, he's building chemistry with all of these guys. And I don't think you're putting yourself in a bad spot, especially the way KOC coaches these guys. you're not really going to be in a bad spot if you bring Darnold back next year. Even if it's JJ just sitting a year, like another year JJ sitting isn't going to kill you one way or the other. I know with, with these young yeah, I know, exactly. And I know with these young quarterbacks, the whole thing with them is like, if you can get them in and get them going, you have so much more money to work in other places. And that's why the Sam Darnold thing might not be a guarantee. But there's just no guarantee J.J. McCarthy is going to come in and have the same success Sam Darnold has had. He may, but there's no guarantee. And at least you know what you're getting with Sam Darnold at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I've been pumping the tires of Sammy Darts all year, but I cannot believe how great he has been so far this season. And you know what's funny? I know that game looks like it was a real nail biter, and it kind of was. But it was the exact same game script as what happened in Lambeau earlier, where the Vikings went up big. They had a nice, comfortable 3-score lead in the fourth quarter. And the Packers came back and chipped away, but it just wasn't enough. There was a couple things. I don't know how much of that game you saw. First of all, the offside penalty on the field goal at the end of this first half. I mean, he missed the 55-yarder. It moved him up for the 50, hit that. They end up winning by 2. That's significant. Yep. And I thought that going forward on fourth down, on a 4th and 3 or 4, whatever it was from the 20-something in the first half in a close game was not necessary. And those points, I mean, we always say, oh, it's great, you're going for it and all that. Sometimes, using a little bit of discretion, taking points and having confidence in your team and your defense is important. But I'm sure Matt LaFleur was probably kicking himself over a couple of those decisions. But bottom line is that this Minnesota team is just not letting up right now. And that game next weekend on Sunday night between the Vikes and the Lions will be, be one of the biggest games for both of those franchises in an incredibly long time before they both go to the playoffs. And I can't help but think we're going to get 2 of those NFC North teams playing each other at some point in the postseason.
Yeah, listen, the NFC playoffs are going to be pretty crazy. Like, just looking at it today, with the Packers down in like the 7th seed, it's going to be like Packers-Eagles wild card weekend. Like, that's going to be like, imagine you're the Eagles, you get the 2 seed, and your reward is you got to play the Packers, just because the tough games they've had to have this year. Obviously, they're in arguably one of the toughest divisions outside of the Bears in football. The Eagles, it's not going to be an easy path for them. It's really not going to be an easy path for anybody. Like I said earlier on in the show, the Bucs are a team that I'm not really ecstatic to play, even though they're the worst. They'd probably be the worst division winner. The Rams are an interesting one. I don't know really what's going on there. They seem to be.
Who scares you more? Like, if you were a team, like if you're the Vikings or the Lions and you're in that 5th spot, who would you rather play, Tampa or LA? I would have originally said Tampa, but I mean, if you look at the Rams, since they had that win over Buffalo, their offense has been very, very pedestrian. And they've just sort of been getting by.
Yeah, like Cup's kind of gone quiet. I think, like you said, if you're looking at recent successes and the way the teams looked, I'd probably say Rams. I'd rather play the Rams. Oh my goodness, sorry. I don't know if you can hear that. My brother's playing Xbox in the other room, and it's like I'm fighting over him right now. Anyways, I think right now for me, I'd probably rather play the Rams than the Bucs. So, one of those things where it's like you don't really get to choose, but you are kind of scheduled. You're kind of watching. You're kind of game watching late to see who it's going to end up being, especially. If you're the Vikings or the Lions and you end up losing that and end up in the 5 seed, like how tough is that? You're going to end up as a 14-win team, and you're going to end up with the 5 seed, and you got to go on the road for at least for probably the whole playoffs if you want to take it all the way to the Super Bowl. So
tough on that note, the one thing that we didn't touch on as far as the playoff scenarios is the 6-7 seed. And you just mentioned, as of right now, with that win, the Commanders are actually ahead of Green Bay based on their win percentage within the conference. And that won't change. Both teams are in the playoffs. So if they both win or they both lose this week, it'll stay that way. Philly Eagles fans, I think, are most definitely going to be big Dallas Cowboy fans this week.
Absolutely. Because
I'm telling you right now, with all respect to Jaden Daniels, and I know they did just beat Philly, albeit with Kenny Pickett in, the Green Bay Packers are a very, very scary wild card team. Despite the fact that they got swept by both the Lions. I mean, they have 5 losses this year, 2 to the Pack, 2 to the Lions, and 1 of the Eagles in the first game of the season. That one was in Brazil. There is a scenario where the Packers get a chance to avenge all of their losses in the postseason and make it to the playoffs, which would be pretty wild. But anyways, the Packers are obviously a big favorite against the Bears. Assuming they win that game, Washington is going to need to win to be the 6th seed, and they would get, in all likelihood, the Rams, and the Packers would travel to the Link to take on the Eagles. So lots going on in the NFL heading into this final weekend, but we're not done this week yet. Right now, over at Coolbet, the Lions are 3.5-point favorites, albeit plus 103 on the minus 3.5. Niners plus 3.5 at minus 114. The money line is minus 179 for the Lions and plus 160 for the Niners. Total on the game is 50. Jake, as I mentioned, I'm really wondering about where to go on this game. Normally, I would say absolutely the Lions are a better team. I'll back them. In a normal situation with other teams, I'd say, well, wait a second. This is a Monday night game. They'll have a short week getting ready for the most important game of the year. Maybe this is the time that we give Jared Goff and Gibbs and some guys the time off. And then I'm reminded that Dan Campbell's an absolute maniac, and I don't think he thinks that way. Where are you for this game, considering the scenario around the Monday nighter and the 1 seed in the NFC?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're all over it. Like, it's one of those situations where it's like, how do you even handicap this game? Because it's the rare, like, week 17 could rest up for week 18, but also the coach is Dan Campbell, and when does he ever rest guys? This is the problem that the Lions are falling into right now, is we're seeing a lot of injuries, on both sides of the ball. Like, we saw what happened with Montgomery going down. They've had a lot of defensive injuries. Like, the Lions realistically want to go in the playoffs as healthy as possible. I know 1 seed would help that a lot. You get the extra bye. That matters more than anything. But like we said, Huss, they can still lose tonight and still get the 1 seed and the bye with a win next week. So, how much are you really putting out there tonight that's going to affect you for next week's game, which is the ultimate prize for the ultimate, seeding. So I do lean Niners with that aspect, but I'm absolutely not overconfident in that. Like you said, Dan Campbell plays to win. I don't know if that guy has like a, 80%, 75% motor in his body. It's 110, it's full throttle with that guy. So it makes me nervous, but I do lean Niners in this spot. I know they don't have much to play for, but at least like it's not a scenario where they're going to be playing to win the football game.
Oh yeah.
Where I think the Lions don't necessarily need to win the football game, and that's kind of where I lean.
No, I mean the Niners right now at 6-9. It's a very disappointing season. They can't get to 500, but they will. They'll be looking to finish strong. Purdy's passing number for tonight's 253.5. Goff's 245.5. The rushing totals: Brock Purdy over 19.5 yards. Garendo 64.5. Jahmyr Gibbs 86.5 is the total. I might lean to the under there. And again, this is just that, like that line makes sense, but someone has to get in Dan Campbell's ear at some point, especially if this game gets sort of rough, and say, right, you know what? Now might be a good time to get some reps in for some players that, we might not need next week in a game that means everything, unlike this one we're playing right now. So, I mean,
you mentioned that, Huss. I'm going over the depth chart here. Craig Reynolds. Do we have a Craig Reynolds anytime number on the board? Plus 275. I don't hate that. If we see a bit more Craig Reynolds tonight as the backup running back for the Lions, like, they're still very effective at running the ball. I know they have two power guys in there, Sonic and Knuckles. Like, they've been incredible all year. With no Montgomery, Gibbs is the lead back. I think you make a great point. You do not want to overwork Gibbs to a point that he gets injured or he's tired for a game that you absolutely need next week. I wouldn't mind seeing a few more Craig Reynolds touches and maybe a trip to the end zone at plus 275.
Yeah, as far as receiving goes, Debo's 47.5, Amon-Ra's 72.5. Like, I'm just kind of thinking about just hitting some Lions unders in this game and seeing if common sense prevails or what the story is. Ricky Pearsall, who missed the first month of the season after getting shot, he's kind of getting a little bit more involved in the Niners passing attack. And to me, games like this, perfect example to try to give a few more balls to some rookies. I'd imagine that he might factor in a little bit more. Don't mind the over 22.5 yards for Ricky Pearsall today. Tim Patrick for the Lions is 28.5. Juwan Jennings for the Niners, 63.5. And then, of course, is Kittle, 66.5. And Kittle has been a beast. Like, when he's on, he's Purdy's favorite target, especially with Ayuk out for the years. He's been pretty much the entire time. There was one maybe over I'd be looking at. It's probably Kittle. I'm just looking at his number of receptions. Ooh, 5.5. And the over is plus 121. I don't mind that. I'd say George Kittle's the one guy that I think I probably look at that I'm pretty confident might be hitting overs. Otherwise, when I think about this game, I'm thinking some unders in specifically for some of the Detroit holes.
Yeah, I hear you, Huss. I think it's one of those situations where it's like Kittle isn't, he kind of reminds me of Dan Campbell, right? It's like he's going to play to his fullest throttle. Dan's going to coach to his fullest throttle. Like, there's no let up with a guy like that. So, Kittle's not going to play in this game just to run routes. He's going to play in this game. He's going to play it hard. And, if you're looking at anybody to go over their numbers tonight, Kittle is not a bad one whatsoever. So yeah, I mean, a tough one to handicap. I don't know how you wanted to spend the rest of our time here. I know we talked about juniors on the shows. Like, I know they just started back in Thursday. We haven't had a lock shop since. Like, do we need to talk about Latvia over the weekend? Do we need to talk about? I see.
It's funny. It's funny.
For tomorrow.
I had just finished an interview with AJ Jakubek in Ottawa, so I was talking about the juniors before we actually started the show. So it feels like I've been talking about it. We actually have it. Just on that note, I can't remember ever being interested in a Latvia-Germany game before at the World Juniors, but I am tonight. I am this afternoon, and look at this. Latvia, they've never been a minus 159 favorite in any game ever in this tourney. Germany at plus 129, I think, is actually some pretty good value. And then tomorrow's game, USA minus 106, Canada minus 120. Again, we'll touch on that tomorrow, I guess, and sort of dive into it a little bit more. But that's obviously a big one. Both teams losing games they didn't expect to lose. USA losing to Finland OT, and everyone heard about the shootout with Latvia beating Canada on Friday night. But I'll tell you what, I mean, it's hard not to look at that Germany number considering who they're playing and think that might be, although I think everyone just sort of kind of is fans of the Latvians for how big of underdogs they are and what they did. It would be pretty cool if they made it through.
Yeah, listen, I said we were sitting in a bar watching the end of that Latvia-Canada game, and like we're just waiting for Canada to score the goal, and it's just like you're just waiting, and I'm like, oh my god, guys, they're playing with fire. Like, dude, this is something's going to go bad here, and sure enough, I mean, it did. And
the shootout,
tough, but
the shootout was so bizarre. It looked like the Canadians had no chance when they were coming in.
I know, but it's crazy because that was the second goal. He started that game. Carter George hasn't let in a goal in the tournament so far. Canada hasn't allowed an even strength goal. I know their level of competition hasn't been as high, but we saw what the Finns did against the U.S. yesterday. it'll be an interesting game with the U.S. I wonder if it'll be a little bit. I'm going to say this, and then it's going to be like a 6-5 final. But I wonder if it'll be a little bit tighter. Like both teams kind of needing wins to kind of lock up that first seed. And I wonder if you're playing a little bit more back, protecting more, as opposed to kind of dictating the game in the offensive zone. So it'll be interesting. Obviously, New Year's Eve showdown with the U.S. Looks like 8 Eastern is the time on that one. So 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Mountain. That'll be a fun one, exciting for New Year's Eve. We also have a college football playoff quarterfinal tomorrow, Penn State, Boise State. So that'll be something you can look forward to. And then on New Year's Day, I think 3 more quarterfinals for the college football playoff.
Well,
a ton more bowl games too.
We're going to need you to put that college football hat on tomorrow. And because obviously no show on New Year's Day. So tomorrow, although quickly, tomorrow's Alabama-Michigan game starts at 11. So we'll be doing the show while that game is on right now. Alabama's 14-point favorites over Michigan. I know Michigan wasn't very good this year. They did beat Ohio State in a pretty important game. I mean, is that too many points? Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I got to look. The problem with these games, Huss, is like there's so many opt-outs and transfer portal situations where, if we're getting a lot more Michigan backups, I do kind of lean to the Alabama backups over the Michigan backups. So I'm sure that's kind of factoring in. It's tough to say, and I guess you kind of have to say right now because we're going to be already on when this game starts tomorrow. But I don't know. I'd have to do a bit of a deeper dive. I don't want to just. It does seem like a lot of points, but usually there's a reason for that, right? And we've seen a lot of these bowl games. The line starts so big, and then it's down to like a pick 'em by game time because all the opt-outs come out, and you're like, oh my god, it's a completely different game the way you bet it.
Well, the bookmakers usually know exactly what they're doing, so I would imagine this number is somewhat of a correct number based on the guys that will and won't be there. Another important thing is, despite the fact that Alabama had some bad losses, they were just on the outside looking, and many people think they should have been in that college football playoff. So they may look to make a resounding statement tomorrow in their final game of the year that they should have been there. Anyways, that's up there. We'll get to the 4 college football playoff games tomorrow. All right. Well, listen, before we go, do we want to spin that wheel and find out who's going to be playing in the game match tonight?
Yeah, hopefully everyone's still in the chat. I've got 10 entries here of people who tweeted the word, so I'm going to spin it right now, and we'll give you the name. Let's see what we got here. So it's Jason Leduc, Smitty the Welder, Cowboy Dudley, Old School Nasty, Darren Ballo, VR Montenegro, Hey Honor, Ryan Ewa, Shotsky, Jerry, and it looks like Cowboy is our winner. So Cowboy, maybe just send us your username, your Coolbet username in the chat so I can grab that, and we'll get you a ticket for tonight's qualifier. Like I said, it's 10 Eastern, 9 Central, 8 Mountain, and it won't be nearly as long as the Lock Shop ones. Like, don't expect to be in for a 3-4 hour night. It's probably going to end up being 1, maybe 2 tables. It'll be a lot quicker of a tournament, but one where you can win a big prize in the Costa Rica festival. You trip down to Costa Rica, like I mentioned. I forget how many nights stay it is, but all your nights accommodation, some allowance for the tournament, and you have a great trip down there. I believe at the I can't remember if it's the end of January or early February, but it's coming up in about a month or so here. So, Cowboy, shoot us your username here in the chat before we time out the show, and I'll get you a ticket for tonight's qualifier. You can also qualify once again on WST. Us is going to run something a little later on during the Coolbet segment, and that'll be there. It is. Name Cowboy WST. Perfect. Right
on, Cowboy. Good luck tonight, buddy. Congratulations. And yeah, for those of you that are poker guys that have played in the previous Lock Shop tourneys, and you've got your Coolbet poker thing, join us in a couple hours. We're going to be talking Jets Preds at 2:30. Then after that, we'll dive into Coolbet lines and whatnot. So we'll do something at the end of the program with all of you that are set up and see if you can get in for that tourney. Jake, in the meantime, fire me a DM if you got any more details on that tourney, and I'll make sure to mention to the folks of what we're doing.
Yeah, I'll get you all the details here, Huss, and it'll be a little easier to read off. And we kind of put this together kind of right before Lock Shop started, so not as prepped as I'd hoped, but it's going to be a good time regardless.
It's all good. We're in the middle of holidays right now. People are away, but great prize, and it should be fun tonight. So, Cowboy, good luck representing the Lock Shop.
I will say
tonight.
As well, Huss, we talked a little college ball. There is one game on today. The Music City Bowl is starting in about 35 minutes or so. Me, Patty, Coolbet Chain, we're jumping on Iowa money line. If anyone wants to ride with us, we got the Hawkeyes today in the Music City Bowl.
I'm in. I just had that great feeling when I pulled up my account and realized, oh, geez, my total is a lot more than I expected it to be. And I had forgotten about a little 3-gamer that I did earlier in the week that had the Commanders, the Raiders, and the Vikings money line plus 426. Cha-ching. And I got to give a special shout out to Tim Anderson on the Mayo shows. I rode with Top Cat on his poinsettia parlay for the weekend, which was some good ones. I mean, there was a lot of favorites that won, but this one was great. It was Chiefs, Ravens, Rams, Chargers, and Seahawks. All in. Thank you very much. Plus $5.99. So a few nice wins coming out of the weekend. Cowboy, nicely done. We'll see you tonight in the tourney. Gang, you'll have another chance to win coming up during the Coolbet line segment for Winnipeg Sports Talk in about 2 hours from now. Right around 2:45, I'd say jump in and make sure you're there with us. Jake, enjoy the games tonight and tomorrow. College football. We might have some more futures to talk about for the NFL once the game tonight is finished. We'll certainly have updated Super Bowl lines and all that. So should be a fun one. And of course, we'll talk more about Canada, USA tomorrow night. And do have Jets Preds this evening. We'll spend more time talking about that. And we'll obviously get into the lines on that. Jets are only minus 125 favorites for some reason against Nashville, the offseason champions. But we'll have all the details on that coming up. Again, tourney tonight. One more chance to get a ticket on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Jake, great stuff as always. We will look forward to another big show tomorrow, getting ready for the college football playoff and more. We'll send it back to the EST oil stream coming up next. And for those of you that want to join us, head on over to Winnipeg Sports Talk. We'll be live in 5. Thanks for hanging with us, everyone. And good luck to everyone playing in the big tourney tonight for Costa Rica over at Coolbet.com.